Hello, Pastor Stuart here with another midweek Bible study video. We are looking at different verses and passages in the book of Proverbs these days. We started last week with the first 6 verses, and today we will read Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7. It will complete what my Bible calls the prologue for the book of Proverbs. And since the book of Proverbs has a lot of different kinds of verses in it, it's not like a chunk of a story or a chunk of a song. It might be like verse, wisdom, knowledge, tip, that kind of thing. For today and a lot of the weeks ahead, we'll read one verse or one group of verses, and then I'll reference other verses elsewhere in the book of Proverbs that connect or that are related or that speak to the verse that we'll be reading today. So Proverbs 1:7 is our main verse for the day, and I'll be referencing a lot of other verses farther along in the book of Proverbs to help enlighten what this short verse but very important verse means. So the verse that we'll read, it makes us think about and ask the question, where does our wisdom come from? Do we just hear something or hear someone state a fact and accept it as the truth without verifying or fact checking, looking into it, praying about it, thinking about it, mulling it over, comparing it with other things that we know, other things we've heard? Do we do some spiritual fact checking, or do we just accept whatever it is that we hear? Now, obviously, hopefully, we don't just accept whatever kind of anything that anybody says to us. Hopefully, we do some spiritual fact checking, even for stuff that you hear from me or from friends or from, Sunday school teachers, Bible study leaders, other preachers, whatever. You should always listen and go, I want to learn more about that. I want to read some more. I want to find out more. I want to check that and see how it fits with what's already out there. Because it's good to make sure that anything we decide to accept as wisdom or knowledge comes from the source and is grounded in the source. And our verse today will show us that source is, of course, God, the source of all wisdom and all life. And this verse, 1:7, it's kind of like a good brief motto or theme for the whole book of Proverbs. All the good things that the first 6 verses in the book that we read last week, all the good things that those verses say Proverbs can teach people. They can teach people different kinds of knowledge, different kinds of people can learn from this book. It all kind of boils back down to this truth. They all start from the same place because all that knowledge, all that wisdom comes from the same place. And it, of course, is God, our source of energy and life and knowledge and wisdom. So here we go. Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. Okay, let's talk about the first part first. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Okay, let's talk about the first part of that first part first. The fear of the Lord. Fear. Now, like all the verses in our Old Testament, it's a translation from the original Hebrew language. And the English word fear that is used in most every English Bible translation, it kind of does an okay job of describing what this verse is saying, but even then, it's not totally adequate to sum up and communicate the full meaning of this truth and what this verse is saying to us. Because, usually when we use the word fear, we mean something's bad. Like it's bad to be afraid of something that makes us afraid is bad. It's just always usually kind of negative, like you don't want to live in fear. You don't want things to make you fearful. Those things are bad. And so we usually kind of have a negative connotation with the word fear. And yet, in the context that this verse and other verses we'll see use this word, they're talking about a healthy kind of fear, a helpful kind of fear. Which is to say, if we as people had no fear at all of anything ever in our whole life, then we would do foolish things, right? We would put our lives at risk. We would put other people's lives at risk. We wouldn't live responsibly because we would have no healthy fear of things that we needed to be conscious of or respectful of, like just driving cars. If we drove our car and never were afraid of, speeding tickets, crashing, seatbelts injury, going too fast. If we just drove a car and didn't have any care or fear at all, we would hurt ourselves and others. Or pilots flying airplanes, or doctors who operate on patients, or even if you're in a boat out on the water, you need to, respect the power of the ocean and the waves. They're beautiful, but you need to have kind of a conscious respect and fear, in a sense of how powerful it is, whether it's cars or life or anything. That's the kind of fear that this verse is talking about. Being mindful of how big and important something is, respecting it, therefore being careful about your actions and your life, having feelings then of awe and reverence. Like if you're standing at the base of a mountain or at the top of a mountain and you look down, the top, like you look down, maybe you're on like a cliff or a gorge and you look down and you have awe and reverence at the beauty, but also there's a healthy amount of fear when you look down and see how far up you are. And that's okay. You would want to have that healthy kind of fear. That's a good thing to have. So that's what this verse is talking about. Not cowering in a fear of the Lord, like, oh no, God, no, God's going to smite us with his angry wrath, lightning bolts, that kind of thing. It's not like being a scared kind of fear, what this verse is talking about. It's about revering the power of God, being mindful and in awe of God's work in creation, respecting God's will so that it moves us to honor God's will and try to live our lives in accordance with God's will. So that's what the Hebrew word is trying to communicate. And it's kind of hard to put all that stuff into one word when you're translating it. So they picked the word fear. And as always, it's good to talk about the context of what the English translation Bible verses mean to help us really understand what the original writers were trying to teach us and convey. Now, there are other verses in Proverbs that talk about a fear of the Lord and the good things that it helps you do and keep in mind. So you could look up Proverbs 10:27. It says that the fear of the Lord adds length to life. And I think we can say that's true. Like, remember our driving analogy. If you don't have that proper kind of respect for your vehicle and other vehicles, your life is not going to be as long as it would otherwise. Proverbs 14:26 says, in the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence. That was New Revised Standard Version. So kind of knowing God's vastness and power and respecting that, and realize that you can connect and tap into it, it gives you a sense of strong confidence. And you then see, it kind of gives you a good perspective on what is truly awesome and vast and majestic, and what is not, the earthly stuff that is not as divine as that. So it gives you a good perspective that gives you confidence. Proverbs 14:27, the next verse after that. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life. Fountain of life. Proverbs 16:6, through the fear of the Lord, a man avoids evil. So it's that sense of living respectfully that helps you be aware mindful, conscious of what's going on around you, temptations, warding off, resisting temptation, making good decisions. That's the kind of avoidance of evil that the fear of the Lord will help you with. So we can see how the fear of the Lord isn't about a being scared kind of fear. It isn't a scary kind of fear. And it's not about just being smart or knowing trivia or the kind of knowledge that it gives you. It's not about, winning at Jeopardy or something like that. The knowledge that the fear of the Lord begins is about respecting what's going on in life and being aware of the consequences of choices and actions and words and what can happen depending on what direction you take, what things you decide, what words you speak. It's not being foolhardy or irresponsible. That's the kind of knowledge that a good fear of the Lord helps us to develop. And the verse 1:7, it says, fear of the Lord is what? It's the beginning of knowledge. It's the source. It's where knowledge starts. So it's like if you want to gain in knowledge, first step on the to-do list is get the right mindset of holy respect and readiness and responsibility. Like you'll never learn anything if you're not in that mindset and ready to start. You have to start your knowledge gaining with that setting of a good respect and fear of the Lord. It starts there, and the verse said that's the beginning, so it keeps going. God is infinite, so us growing in knowledge will also be infinite. It will last our whole lives, the whole entirety of our lives, however long they may be. We can always be growing in wisdom and gaining in knowledge because knowledge is of God and it comes from God. So it is the foundation. And then as we learn more and more about God and ourselves and the world around us, then we build on that beginning's foundation. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, the foundation. And we build on it the rest of our whole lives, as we should. We should want to learn more about God and ourselves and God's creation and how it works and how we affect it and all that stuff. We should always want to be gaining in godly knowledge because all truth is God's truth. And we should want more of that. It always made me sad when I would read history books as a history major and in seminary. Over the centuries, there have been movements in like churches and denominations that discouraged learning and going to school and did not want their ministers to have an education or to be trained. They had this aversion to what you might call too much book learning. They were kind of scared of that gaining in knowledge. But as we can see, gaining in knowledge is a godly thing. We should want to develop it, want to grow. And it's also worth pointing out here that the Hebrew words for knowledge and the Hebrew word for wisdom, two different words, they are very synonymous, and you'll see them kind of used interchangeably in different contexts. So Proverbs 1:7 that we read said the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. But if you look at Proverbs 9:10, and if you look at Psalms 111 verse 10, those verses say the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So as we read through Proverbs and we see English words like wisdom and knowledge pop up, just remember that in Hebrew, there are two different words, but they're kind of synonymous and they're kind of interchangeable, as we can see between like Proverbs 1:7 and Proverbs 9:10. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge and wisdom as well. Okay, let's talk about the second part of that verse. Second part of verse 1:7 is about fools. And as we will see, we can also quote the wise Mr. T and say, we pity the fool. So the last half of verse 1:7 says, Fools despise wisdom and discipline. That was the New International Version that I was reading from. The New Revised Standard Version says, fools despise wisdom and instruction. They just do not want to learn. Now, just as the book of Proverbs has a lot to say about wisdom and being wise and gaining knowledge, it also has a lot to say about fools and being foolish and the consequences thereof. So that's why Proverbs 1:7 really is a good kind of theme verse description for the book, because it's about the benefits of gaining knowledge and the pitfalls, the bad consequences of being foolish and refusing knowledge. Now, in Hebrew, there are at least 4 different words that might be translated as fool in English. Kind of like maybe you've heard in the New Testament, there are like 3 different Greek words for love, and it's like different kinds of love that we feel. Same kind of idea. In Hebrew, there are at least 4 different words that in English are translated as fool. So let's talk about each one. They all pop up in the book of Proverbs. So I will throw out some other Proverbs references where those kinds of fools pop up. So the first Hebrew word, you might pronounce it as peti. That means a simple fool, a simpleton, someone who is naive or gullible. They're just not with it. They're not really aware of what's going on, so they are easily fooled. And we saw that in our verses last week when we were reading through Proverbs 1:4 says that this book can give prudence to the simple. Well, that word for simple is this word peti, and it's not necessarily like a bad thing, like a negative character trait in itself, because none of us knows everything. Certainly when we start off when we're young, we don't know very much, and you don't know something until you learn it. So it's an okay place to start, being simple and unlearned. But as long as you don't stay there and you keep growing, that's what's important. It is bad if you just kind of stay in that kind of simple, naive foolishness your whole life. Like we all start with young bodies and young minds. And like I said last week, everyone's body grows, but not everyone's mind grows. And this would be kind of like the peti, the simple fools, the simpletons. Proverbs 1:7 points out that, what was it, Proverbs 1:7? Let's see. Oh, I need to check that reference. There's somewhere else in Proverbs that uses that Hebrew word, and it says that if you have that type of foolishness, it gets you into trouble easily. So if you can develop a little wisdom and not be that kind of simpleton fool, then you can avoid that kind of easy trouble. And I did not write down that reference. So I will write it down in the video description below. Sorry about that. There was a lot, as you can see, and as you will hear, there's a lot of different verse references in Proverbs. And I thought I wrote it down right, but I did not. Okay, the next kind of fool is in Hebrew pronounced nabal. And this kind of fool is very crude, maybe vulgar or profane. It's the kind of fool who doesn't make kind of moral distinctions about what is right and what is wrong, and just doesn't let something like morality or good morals hold him back from doing something. So when another person, tries to call him on that, like, well, you shouldn't do that, it's not right, it's immoral or whatever, then this type of fool, the nabal kind of fool, resents any kind of moral chastening or lesson or something like that. But because of that, in his heart, he is unhappy, because you can't just be content like that. Okay, third Hebrew word for fool is kesel. Kessil, kind of fool, is what you might just call like a dumb person. It's a stupid kind of fool, just kind of ignorant. Proverbs implies that they are unteachable, like they just kind of refuse to learn, like refuse to get it. In Proverbs 10:1, it says that folks who are a kessil kind of fool are embarrassing. And Proverbs 10:23 says that they almost seem to enjoy doing dumb stuff that is also bad. I'm sure there are a lot of different YouTube videos you can find for examples of that, when people just do stuff that's dumb and then they get hurt or they injure themselves. It's like hey, watch this, and that, they try to drive a four-wheeler off a cliff, or something like that. That's the kind of foolishness that Kessil would refer to. The last, fourth Hebrew word for fool is eveel. It means a brash fool. And that's the one that's used in our verse in 1:7. Also, it's used in Proverbs 26:12, which says that someone who is an eveel, kind of fool, is someone who is wise in their own eyes. Proverbs 26:12 says. So they are arrogant, prideful. They think they know everything, even though they really don't. So Proverbs 12:15 and 16 says that an eveel, kind of fool, doesn't listen to advice and gets upset when people give them advice and tries to tell them like what's really going on, because an eveel kind of fool is so arrogant that they think they already know everything. So anyone who tries to correct them, they'll get upset at. So that kind of fool is reckless, irresponsible, and quick-tempered whenever someone tries to tell them something. And again, that's the kind of fool that's translated in verse 1:7. Fools despise wisdom and discipline because they don't want to hear it. They don't want to. They don't think that they need to hear any wisdom or discipline because they think they've already got it. So they won't have any restraint. They won't have any prudence about their lives. So especially in that kind of foolishness and in the other types of foolishness in Hebrew, you can hear the opposite of what the fear of the Lord should be and what it should give to us, the mindset it should help us to have. Because in all those types of foolishness, especially the last one that 1:7 references, there is no humility, there is no reverence, there's no respectfulness, certainly no willingness at all to learn new things or to change, grow, adapt, improve. And that's why our verse says that they despise wisdom and discipline. Now, if you have a right relationship with God, on the other hand, you will always not just accept wisdom and discipline, but welcome it and be eager to learn. You will want to be corrected if you've gotten something wrong, because you are always wanting to improve yourself, grow your knowledge, develop your wisdom. And that's what a right relationship with God, a healthy fear of the Lord will give you. You should wake up every morning and say, Lord, teach me something new today. Expand my heart and mind today. Because if you're alive, you have not learned everything yet. You know what I mean? So wake up every morning and ask God to teach you today. That is a healthy fear of the Lord, because you recognize God's infinite vastness and recognize that we are still learning. That's the beginning right there. So first thing in the morning, that's the beginning of knowledge, the beginning of wisdom. Not starting with yourself and how much you think you know or how great you want to come off and look, but starting with a reverent and ready relationship with God. So let that guide your thinking and your open-mindedness this week. And again, that's my challenge for you, to wake up every morning and or as you pray to start your day, include in your prayers a request that God would teach you something today, show you something new, and help you gain in knowledge and wisdom. All right. Until next time, I'll see you then. Bye-bye.